around Bristol, talking to Native communities and other folks who live out there, and talking about a huge sort of unprecedented open pit mine that they would like to develop in that watershed. And I'd like you just to imagine for a second, if you're very familiar with this project, if someone showed up in your community and said, hey, we have a plan to forever and fundamentally change the socioeconomic situation in your community, build roads into a place that has none, a tremendous environmental impact, and fundamentally really change your food source, which is salmon, that your culture is dependent on for 8,000 years. Many people in Bristol Bay, 60 to 70% of their food right out of the river every year. So imagine you're in a community, these companies come in, and this is their kind of pitch to you. Needless to say, there was kind of an immediate knee-jerk reaction from the communities. They're excited about the potential for additional jobs, but incredibly concerned about the impact to their sustainable food source. And they went to the state legislature, they went to the governor's office, they went to the Department of Natural Resources, all at the state level, and expressed their concern. And nearly to a person were ignored by state officials who just kept repeating wait for the company, actually apply for permits, go through a process, and then decide whether or not 10 million tons of perpetually toxic mine waste is good for your community or not. And it really, I think, motivated a lot of people who don't have a huge amount of faith in the federal government to being told to just sort of go away by the state years and years. Those people eventually got motivated to visit with the Environmental Protection Agency. And in 2010, federally recognized tribes, a commercial organization called the Bristol Bay Regional Seafood Development Association, Trout Unlimited, and a bunch of other sport and hunting organizations, petitioned the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency to use a little used and little known section of the Clean Water Act, Section 404C, protects waters of the United States from things like mine waste from an open pit mine. And said to please act immediately to ensure that our communities are protected against this proposed pebble mine. The EPA responded by doing a watershed assessment, which was essentially a scientific investigation. They said, we understand your concern, understand the potential risks, but the EPA is a science-based organization, was unwilling to move forward with any sort of policy recommendation until they spent years taking the science. For the past 3 years, the EPA has been engaged in reviewing existing science, interviewing Native elders, talking to people in those communities, and really trying to qualify and quantify what potential risks and impacts would be from the pebble mine. And the watershed assessment was peer-reviewed twice by an independent peer review committee. There were 7 public hearings and 2 national comment periods. 80% of the people in Bristol Bay encouraged EPA to move forward. There were 1 million comments nationally to move forward with this 404C and the pebble mine. And over 60% of Alaskans statewide supported EPA moving forward, which is unprecedented. If you look at kind of natural resource issues in Alaska, if you use Arctic National Wildlife Refuge as an example, 10% of Alaskans would like to see it protected, and 80% would like to see it drilled. So there's a very sort of different fundamental thing going on with the whole issue in Alaska, and I personally believe it has a lot to do with the 14,000 commercial fishing jobs that are at risk, and the nearly unified local communities who are opposed to the project. So it was finalized. The things were clear. Over 80 miles of stream miles and 5,400 acres of wetlands would be impacted, and that's under a best case scenario. So that's if the tailings impoundment dam, which is a dam to hold back this 10 billion tons of toxic slurry, have a problem while it contained that waste for 10,000 years. The best case scenario, you're losing miles and miles and miles of salmon streams and over 4,000 acres of wetlands. And the science was incredibly clear. And EPA took a couple of months, I think, to sort of review science and think about what the logical next step was. And that next step, as Tyler just discussed, happened just last week when the administrator of the EPA announced that initiating this 404C process that commercial fishermen and sportsmen asked for 3 years ago. And it's frankly an incredibly exciting time. I think there's no question that if the administration completes this process that they've started, this will be seen as one of the most important things that they did years for both the environment, for tribal people, and for people who depend on natural resources for their jobs. So I just, before I wrap up, give a quick overview of the next steps and leave you with a final thought about kind of where we stand if you care about this issue. So the next steps in this process is a draft determination. So after we get through this initial 15-day period that we're in, they sort of give us an announcement, the project proponent and Army Corps of Engineers, State of Alaska, have 15 days to respond to EPA and say, you know what, you've got this wrong, do a 404C, and this is why. If we convince the EPA that they should proceed with a 404C, step in this process is what's called a draft determination. Really, will EPA's kind of specific policy recommendations for protect Bristol Bay moving forward. After there'll be a public comment period in public hearings on draft determination, and then after the EPA reviews those comments and incorporates the feedback from the public and agencies and industry, it's our they will get to the final determination, which will be the sort of law of the land, and we believe will prevent the pebble mine moving forward. I give you with this, all this has done an incredible amount of work. I think today that most of the people sort of outside this looking in thought we would never get to announce a 404C as an understatement. I think we've exceeded our own expectations. Unfortunately, the administration can stop this 404C process that's been said at any time. We move mountains to get where we are, but question that we still have work to do, that if the administration decides that the political pressure from the mining company or the state of Alaska is too big, they've decided it's just not worth it, move forward, and they could pause this process at any time. So the closing message here is, thank you. We've come an incredibly long way. We've exceeded expectations, but the work is not over. I think to keep the pressure on the decision makers to do the right thing here, And then a year from now, if we do that and do it well, we could have a final determination that forever protects Bristol Bay.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so sorry, everyone. Somehow my phone isn't letting me talk. So, hi. It's there again. I'm going through and unmuting people so we can ask some questions of Shorin. But I want to confirm one quick thing with you, Shorin, that I heard you say. There are two ways that folks can really continue to be involved in this effort. One is engaging in the public comment and town hall process that EPA is going to be hosting as they go through 404C, but also continuing to keep pressure on the EPA and the White House, just articulating how important this place is to protect so that they feel sort of inspired and called to move forward with the plans that they've laid out. Is that a fair statement?
Absolutely.
So I want to turn it over to other folks on the call. Questions for probably more likely Shorin, or myself. Things that didn't explain very well. Anything else that you would like more clarity on, or questions that you have about Bristol Bay and the Pebble Mine?
I have one question.
Great. Is that it?
Yeah, it's and the question is, what is a 404C process?
Good question. So, Section 404C, section of the Clean Water Act that was passed in the 1970s. The Clean Act was passed in response to Cuyahoga River catching on fire and of other high-profile issues that helped us realize as a country that our drinking water and groundwater were under threat and needed help. So Section 404C of the Clean Water Act is a section that allows EPA to step in and protect water of the United States, which are identified as navigable. So talking about mud puddles, it has to be a or a stream. It allows them to protect or a wetland, and it allows them to protect those waters of the U.S. from development that would hurt fisheries activities, drinking water, and a number of other sort of uses of those waters. They're going to be damaged resource development. So that's really the decision that EPA has made at this point, that developing a pebble mine that will generate 10 billion tons of waste is incongruous with being drinking water, fisheries habitat, and these other uses that local native people and others use Bristol Bay for.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks, Sean. Questions for our presenter, or questions about Bristol Bay?
Okay.
Hi, sir.
John, you mentioned that at any they could pause the process, and you said it could eventually, EPA could make this a final determination, and would that like forever?
Yeah, I wish I could tell that our federal government only depends on science when it makes decisions, but Fortunately, politics often play a role in controversial decisions like this. So I think the way that this process gets stopped is if the company, the state of Alaska, which are frankly working hard to stop EPA from moving forward, if they're successful in intimidating the agency to the point that they decide for whatever reason that moving forward is no longer worth it, or if Congress threatens the administration, I think there's a scenario where they potentially decide that it's not worth the political heat that they're taking to tax place for generations to come. So I think it's incumbent on all of us to make sure that Congress and the administration know how important it is they finish the job that they've started. It's simply unacceptable to Alaska Native people, coastal fishermen, and all the other people who depend on this place in a place where the uncertainty continues to rule the successful in that, and EPA does get to the final determination, that decision is final. And it would take a lawsuit for a future administration coming in and making a highly controversial action to change it. But within a year from now, EPA is saying that the rest of this process should take about a year. It's right, and we all do our jobs well. Of a final decision that will prevent Pebble Mine from being built.
Kendra, I had a question related along those lines. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Kendra, how are you?
I'm good. The EPA explicitly said that any decision would relate only to Pebble, but in the Bristol Bay Webinar assessment, they outlined many mining claims and prospects surrounding the Pebble prospect. So, any comment on whether the other prospects could go forward, or whether there are ways to, whether we should be talking about the whole area, get the whole area protected, and what direction we could go with that?
Question. My take on this, and I think you really have to ask the EPA to really had conversations with them about this yet, but get conversation with them to really understand why they made the decision they did. But my guess would be that the way that the Water Act is written, is 4C tool is really meant to be used project by project. Those other mine claims are at the point where they've actually put a plan out to the same level of detail that Pebble did. So the goal issue from the start. The thing I'll say about your question is that Pebble and all these other mining claims are on state of Alaska lands. And at some point, and the EPA has authority over the water, but at some point, the state of Alaska, the governor's office, and the state legislature have to come to terms with the fact that 80% of the people in this area are opposed to this type of development. Up to the state to sort of listen to those people and manage the Bristol Bay watershed, which is an area bigger than Kentucky, in a way that supports local Native people and commercial fishing jobs. So part of the reason why EPA did what they did is a goal question. I would guess that they just didn't feel like the Water Act allowed them to apply that tool over the size of Kentucky. And the second part of the answer is the state of at some point has to start listening to local people. They have the real authority to staging this that in tune with what local people and industry want.
Will?
Great. Other questions for Karen? We just into state versus federal capacity and call to act, so getting into the weeds. Curiosities, questions about next steps, or anything along those lines? Okay, great. Folks have found this wonderful. I know we didn't give people a lot of time to register, but with the exciting news that came out last Friday, we wanted to make sure that folks felt like we're up to speed with what was happening and what comes next in this really important process that our brothers and sisters in the Orthodox Church and up in Alaska have been so dedicated to for so many years. So I've recorded this webinar. We'll be sharing the recording with folks if you are interested in passing it along to colleagues or using it in the future. But we, as the faith community, have a huge role to play in EPA's next steps over the coming year as they walk through the process of using the Clean Water Act to protect this beautiful place. So I just want to say thank you to Sharon, who has been really busy since EPA's announcement last Friday, for carving out a little bit of your time to be with us today. Thanks to the folks who hopped on the webinar. And please, we will be keeping you up to date as we hear things from EPA, as we hear stuff from folks in the region, as we continue to work with our senior religious leaders up in Alaska on protecting this beautiful place. So thank you all for your time, and we look forward to talking with you all again soon.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Sean.